The last thing you want is for something to go wrong with your plumbing, but it happens a lot. And the last thing you want when there's water spraying all over your kitchen or your toilet is overflowing is looking up reviews on which plumber you should call. So let me save you some time. Call the Art of Plumbing. They're always on time. They can locate the problem and fix it right away. They even help with solutions to stop any future problems. Save time. Call the Art of Plumbing today. 541-951-9405.
Hey, come take a walk with me. Not like you used to do. Do something different and put yourself in other people's shoes. Open up your mind and open up your eyes and change your direction, change your perspective.
Welcome into Other People's Shoes. I am your host, Neil Matthews. Thanks so much for joining us this week. It's not every day you get to talk to somebody from an RV, so we'll get to that in just moments from now. But help me welcome in our guest. He's been a business owner. He's been an executive leader. He is just an all-around coaching mentor guy. He's been an author. He's a podcaster. This is a podcast you may want to go check out after you're done listening to him today, because it's going to create a lot more questions, I'm sure, in your mind, perhaps. He facilitates this show called Seek, Go, Create. And him and his wife have been living in a 39-foot RV, traveling the country, living out of it. And there's many, many stories that I'm sure have come out of that living experience. And we're going to dive into that today. But help me welcome in my guest, Tim Winters. Tim, how are you?
Great. How are you doing today, Neil?
I think I said your last name wrong. It's Winders, not Winters. Winders. So let's get that right.
I answer to a lot of stuff, and you were close enough. I tell you, a lot of people can really butcher it.
I don't know how I butchered it, but anyway, Tim Winters is here today. So Tim, thanks so much for joining us. Where are you guys located at? I know the RV kind of travels around, kind of like game day, but where are you at today?
Yeah, well, there actually hasn't been a lot of game day or a lot of traveling for a lot of people in the last few months, but we are currently in Colorado, and I'm just south of Colorado Springs right now. And we've actually been here stationary for a few months, which is kind of unique for us. But that's where we are. It's a beautiful day today, about 66 degrees, and Colorado sunshine shining brightly.
That's awesome. I've never made it out to Colorado, but one day maybe. I'd love to go see the Rockies, not only the baseball team, but the actual Rockies.
Well, we were right on what they call the Front Range, where I jokingly say it's where Kansas meets the mountains. I mean, we're, 100, 150 miles from the Kansas border, but it's really where those mountains just start jutting up out of the plains, and I could look over to my right and see some, being from Georgia, we would call them mountains. Being here, they call them hills. But they're starting to develop right beside us, and we're really not far from Pikes Peak for those people that kind of know that area. And it's one of the famous 14,000-foot mountains in these Colorado Rockies. I think there's 52 or 53 of them, and so it is a beautiful place. You really do need to visit the Rocky Mountains.
For sure. It's definitely on the list of places to visit. And I got to be honest, some of the information you gave us just causes so many questions in my mind of not only this RV life, but just your life in general. And I think that's why we pursued you to come on the show, is because we really want this unique perspective. So before we get too far, though, we got to answer, of course, I believe it's the most important question you'll answer in your lifetime. So I know you've probably been interviewed by a number of places and people, but probably no one has ever asked you this most important question. So are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm a little nervous, but I'm ready.
Good. Tim, what size shoes do you wear?
That is a great question. Right now I'm a size 10 is what I've been ordering. For a long time, I thought I was a 9.5, and I actually just gave away a pair of shoes that I ordered too small. So size 10.
Okay. And is there a certain brand or style that you like more than another?
Right now I'm in the time of year where all I wear are flip-flops. So if that gives you anything about my personality, I've got a pair of flip-flops on my feet. Just got them the other day. I have been liking Allbirds, though, which are kind of a cool wool shoe if I actually have to cover up my toes.
Gotcha. All right. Fair enough. I don't know if I can go with the flip flop thing. Being a shoe nut that I am, I don't know. Flip flops are just one of those things I just can't gravitate towards. So, but anyway, it's okay. We want your perspective. That's why we're trying to get into your shoes. That's the reason for the question. So, in case your inquiring minds want to know, right, why we asked that question, that's why.
Well, to feed possibly a negative stereotype, I am from the southern United States. I'm from Georgia. And many people in other parts of the country make jokes about those people don't even wear shoes, and we used to always joke about Alabama. They don't even wear shoes there. So maybe it's me going back to the roots of my Georgia upbringing that I would truly rather not be wearing shoes, but if I've got to wear some, it's just going to be a thin little piece of plastic with a little strap that holds them on.
I like it. Being the Tar Heel that I am, I was born in North Carolina, so we get our state name from people not wearing shoes. So it's kind of weird on that too, the Tar Heel state. So, but Tim, talk about this change, this amazing transition in your life. I say amazing because maybe it was, maybe it wasn't at the time, but take us back if you can. 2008. Why was that so hard and challenging for you and your bride?
Well, 2008, I'm sure most people that are listening in, Neil, would recall that there had been a long run-up. Real estate had been doing extremely well. The economy had been doing well. Everything, at times can look good. But we had developed and created some real estate businesses. We had, at that time, we were holding over 100 pieces of property. And so we were managing and owning that real estate. At the time, the value was over 15 million. Obviously it was a bubble. So, what was the actual value? Who knows? We also had a few other companies, a national coaching business, and we had a national lead generation business. And if we were to value those businesses, I'm just giving people perspective here, not boasting, just saying what they were probably 7-figure businesses too. So we had 3 companies doing very well in '08. They were all related to real estate. And just to kind of compress the story, Neil, we, by the time 2013 rolled along, we were homeless, had been forced to move out of because we lost our 6,000 square foot home we were living in, and we were living in a Honda van traveling as nomads.
That to me is still fascinating to me that it can all be gone in a moment, right?
It can be. What's interesting about it, and I know at the time we're recording this, there's been a lot of interesting things going on in the world, because if we fast forward back to the beginning of January, things seemed to be going well and okay. And then, all of a sudden this pandemic, and it happened so quickly. Well, you mentioned gone in a moment. It really didn't seem like that when we were going through it. We kind of kept thinking things would turn around. We kept thinking they would do well. And it seemed like things were almost going in slow motion. It's real flippant for me to say, yeah, in '08, we were doing this. And then by 2013, we had gone through bankruptcy, had lost everything, and we were homeless traveling in a Honda van. It sounded quick the way I said it, but let me just tell you, from being in my shoes, it seemed like slow motion, molasses, whatever, like I was in quicksand, whatever term you want to use, it seemed slow to me.
Yeah, no, and I know you're giving us the kind of Reader's Digest fast forward, click fast, motion of that. But I'm curious, like when that happens, when everything kind of settles out and it's all done, like what time period are we in? Are we still in '08, or is this like '09 when finally things kind of just were done with all of your businesses and you're in this Honda van?
Yeah, it was actually slower. Like I said, it was '08 would have been '07, '08 would have been kind of the peak. And that was when, Lehman Brothers and other companies, we realized there was a problem with the economy. And so really it was just kind of this slow process. And I'll tell you something too. This is maybe kind of a spiritual aspect of it. I had this overly optimistic mindset that everything was just going to magically turn around within a day or so. And that was part of the issue for us, because had I just gone ahead and made some adjustments, cut some of our overhead, gotten rid of some assets, done some things a little more aggressively, instead of thinking, Neil, that any day now the economy is going to magically turn, we could have salvaged some of that. But it was just like it just kind of kept getting worse and worse. I was still going out and doing some speaking and teaching and training in real estate in '09. We actually still were working to acquire some in '09 and 10. And then it just got to the point where we were just trying to keep funding everything when things were still going slow, and we were tapping into credit lines. So we were going into more debt, which is never a good thing. And it just led to that process of 2013. I still remember it vividly. I remember June of 2013, sheriff knocking on our door, and we had gone through the foreclosure process. We were trying to stay in our house as long as we could. And he said, it's time to move out. And so we took what little stuff we had left in there, and we got in our van and we hit the road. So I guess I'm kind of saying it was, there wasn't really a lot of impactful moments along the way. The moment I remember was the '08 crash, and then this long, slow process. And then 2013, when we all of a sudden moved out of that home and just became homeless nomads.
What was that like? Sheriff coming to the door? Do you know he's coming? What's that about?
Yeah, because of my background in real estate, and I know a lot of the legal aspects, none of it was surprising to me. And I probably had the ability to prolong it more than we should have. My wife and I have talked about this quite a bit, Neil, and we've said that we would probably have just gone ahead, and a term we use in the South, cut bait and run, cut bait and just moved on earlier had we kind of known how things would play out. But I've kind of meditated and thought about this. I've taken this to the Lord. I've spent a lot of time in prayer over this, and we deal in a world where business people like myself, really a lot of people, and we have a lot of pride, we have a lot of ego. You build companies like we do, and you kind of think maybe you're something, and then when all of a sudden you start losing that, there can be quite a bit of guilt, quite a bit of shame. We had investors, Neil. We had investors that invested with us. And I had to get on the phone with them and say, listen, these investments are not going to work. They were somewhat understanding because investments were falling left and right everywhere. But I would say that guilt and shame was probably the biggest thing that I had to overcome. I probably put on a pretty happy face, probably tried to straighten my back up for my wife and our children that were kind of grown at the time. But it was probably eating me up on the inside.
Yeah, I can't even imagine that. Like, one, having the heights that you're at. You gave us numbers at 5.2 million in real estate, right? And then not having that at all.
Yeah.
That's a lifestyle. That's a frame of reference that honestly I have no point of reference on. I've never seen that money in my career. I don't know too many that have that I've interacted with. And I guess to me, Tim, that is so fascinating. I guess is a lack of word. I'm struggling for a word right now, but fascinating for me that it can be that high up and then be down that low in just a series of years, really. And to me, when you talk about your ego, you talk about this humbling moment. To me, that's so crazy. And there's no way that could have been stopped, right?
I felt as if at the time I had done everything I could to stop it. One of the things, technically most of this was business related, and I won't get into all the details of legalities with bankruptcies and business failures, but when there is a business failure, the business can file bankruptcy and liquidate assets. When there's a personal bankruptcy, it's kind of done usually for things like saving a home. And that's really one of the reasons why we went through personal bankruptcy, was to just see if we could save our personal home and stay in it until the economy rebounded or something happened, or, we were able to get our businesses going again. But I guess in answer to your question, that was I think it was such a wise thing that you said, that it was difficult to fathom. And I think that's the power of this show that you have, is putting yourself in someone else's shoes, even if they are flip-flops. But the interesting thing is I've never thought about it in the way you just brought it up. And I've been interviewed and written about it and talked about it, and we've done it on our podcast. I've kind of gone through the testimony of it, but I've never thought about it that many people can't relate to the situation that we were in. But that's what really makes it unique to every individual. I think a lot of people have difficulty relating to the situations that other people in, which is the cool thing about what you're doing with this show.
Thank you for that. Yeah, like I said, I don't know, when that information came across to us, I'm like, wow. Like, I just that's hard to believe. Now, I know that's not your personal money, right? That's investments. That's the overall net profit, or maybe not net profit, but net value of it and all that. I get that, but I know, I don't know. It was crazy to me that I thought, man, how does someone go from that high to that low and still able to, and this is the leading into my question, still able to pick your head up, right? And say, okay, dust ourselves off, put our flip-flops on in your case, right? Okay, let's try this again. Let's go again. Where does that spirit come from to go again after such in my mind, a very catastrophic failure?
Well, I think to answer that question, we have to back up and go to my spiritual foundation, because if everything related to that was based on Tim and Tim alone, or my wife's name's Glory, Tim and Glory, then it's hard for me to imagine the, dusting yourself off and keeping on going. But I always felt as if the Lord was not bringing this on. I don't think the Lord brings things on like pandemics and economic downturns, but I'm a firm believer, and I don't think you'll mind me referencing Scripture.
Nope, we love Scripture.
I'm a firm believer in Romans 8:28 that the Lord uses all things for the good of those people that love Him, and I love Him. I can't say that I always listen and obey well, but I do love the Lord. And so the optimism, and I'll even say it, this eternal optimism, is that somehow, some way, things are going to work out. And during that time, there's probably another layer of information that you need. As we were in that home that we were starting to get rid of furniture and realize we may not be able to live in forever, and we need to start lightening our possessions and those things, my wife and I was trying to do some business. I was trying to get some work. I even tried to go get a job at the local McDonald's just outside the gates of our community that we lived in, our resort community with golf courses and all. But I couldn't even get a job at McDonald's. It was almost as if the Lord was really wanting to use this for something bigger than just this business downturn, this financial situation, this ugly whatever it was. I needed to learn how to rest and be quiet and still and listen to the Lord. So for a number of those years between 2008 and 2013, Neil, my wife and I would get up every morning, we would fix our coffee, and we would sit with the Word of God, and we would study, and we would ask questions of each other, and we would sometimes cry out to the Lord. And many times it was probably angry with the situation we were in. We were probably, crying out, "Why, Lord? Why, Lord?" But I'll say that during that time, He began just softening our hearts, showing us how, and I'll just speak to me, that the world necessarily didn't revolve around me, and that it wasn't one of these self-made, if it is to be, it's up to me. You know, I'm always been pretty good at business, pretty proficient at creating business, and you and I've had some business conversations. I could talk that language, so I kind of thought pretty highly of myself, and I think that the Lord was going to use those skills and talents that He blessed me with, but He needed me to understand the relationship that I had with Him, and that's really what came out of that quiet time, that quiet season that was very difficult. But in looking back now, it was so significant.
Thanks for sharing that, Tim. I appreciate that. I guess for me, it's still very heart-wrenching to think about, but I also think if I'm going to, try to put myself in your place, which I do often, is what would I do in that situation? When the boat is sinking and the water's coming in and you're doing everything you can to get your bucket and bail that water out, and eventually you kind of have to throw up your hands and say, well, we're going to have to swim because this boat's not going to make it, And so I'm curious about this. Greatest thing you've ever searched for in life, what would that be?
Greatest thing I've ever searched for in life? That is a great question, and it gives me pause. I'm going to answer it two ways. I'm going to give a natural answer, and then I'm going to give a spiritual answer.
Totally
if that's
fine.
okay.
Yeah.
In the natural, looking back, I may not have known it at the time, but looking back now, I'm married now for over 31 years, and in the natural, without knowing the greatest thing I was searching for, it was for my wife, Glory, because of the way she has completed me and rounded me out and filled in the gaps. And I hope that I filled in the gaps for her. And it's a true covenant. It's a true example of the spiritual covenant that I believe we're to have with the Father. And that is the covenant that I have with my wife. So that's the number one natural answer. From a spiritual standpoint, the thing that and there's a word that means a lot to me, which is seek. It's the first word in the name of my podcast, and it's also the first word in Matthew 6:33, which is seek ye first the kingdom of God. And the thing that I have been seeking the most, sometimes more diligently than others, is a personal, deep, intimate relationship with my Creator, my Father. And I'm excited that I'm able to do that through His Son, Jesus Christ, because of what happened on the cross. So to me, that is what I've been seeking. I haven't always known that. And listen, I'm still learning that. I think people that are followers of Christ or people that are on any spiritual journey, that's what they're doing. But that is probably the thing that I continue seeking or searching for the most in my life, because I'm not sure that we could ever arrive at that.
Yeah, we've been asking that question a lot since we started our fifth season of why people are searching for something or what they've been searching for. I kind of stole it from U2 a little bit. I know you know the band U2, right? Joshua Tree, things like that. But Bono says, "I still haven't found what I'm searching for," and so that lyric reminds me every time we do a podcast this season that we're on this search. We don't know what we're looking for quite yet, but maybe we'll find it eventually. So here we go, that we continue with that.
So one thing cool about that, Neil, I actually had something pop up recently on Facebook that 3 years ago, I was at Levi Stadium in the Bay Area in California.
Santa
I think
Clara.
it's Santa Clara. Yeah. And I went to U2's concert of the Joshua Tree, where they were doing the entire album in concert. And I saw the video of it that I had posted on Facebook from 3 years ago, and there were 60,000 people there. And in my mind, with all that's going on right now and pandemic and weird stuff and all, I was sitting there thinking to myself, I was a little bit sad. I said, I wonder if we'll be able to put 60,000 people in a stadium anytime again soon. But Great album, great reference to you two, and the concert was phenomenal.
Well,
just so you know.
it's funny because I was looking at Facebook right before we started recording, and I saw that video, and I thought we got to ask the search question. So as I was getting ready for today, I was thinking, man, Tim's a U2 fan. He'll totally get our search reference. So there we go. So that I'm glad that
Cool.
worked out. So
Yeah.
Speaking of searching and thinking of things and how we process information and I believe personally, and maybe I'm wrong on this, and maybe we can lean into your understanding on this heavily as far as your business savvy and just your entrepreneurial spirit and everything that comes with that, and your Georgia Tech background, which I'm struggling with as a Tar Heel. So everyone needs to know that it's okay. We can have Yellow Jackets on the show. It's fine. For those that are sports fans, we'll get that. If you didn't, it just went over your head. So, but this idea of a definition of a leader and leadership, how on earth and why on earth is this definition of yours so profound and different than others?
You know, Neil, I believe it's because of the experience that I've been through. Back in the 80s, when I was coming along, and I'm not older, I'd call it mature now, but there was a character on TV, and I can't remember if it was Family Ties or Growing Pains. It was Michael J. Fox played Michael P. Keaton, and he was like this young guy in high school that was always about the money, always going to be successful. And I think his parents were like hippies, I think. And so it created this political conflict within their house, which that's what sitcom comedies are all about. But that was me, Neil. I was that guy that I was going to be successful. And you know, I'm not going to say I was willing to trample over people or, you know, leave bodies along the wayside, but I was willing to do a lot of things. I mean, that's one of the reasons I went to Georgia Tech. I mean, I lived 45 minutes down the road from Georgia Tech, and in 1981, 82, when I was coming out of high school, U.S. News and World Report or some magazine had this that said the top 5 most in-demand jobs right now, and 4 out of the 5 were engineers. So I just kind of rolled out of bed and said, I'm going to be an engineer. I'm okay at math. I'm okay at, you know, chemistry, physics. I think I was a little delusional, just so you know. Georgia Tech is a very difficult school. And, but that's the reason I went to Georgia Tech, because I was going to succeed. And this is a little bit of a long answer, but so I went through, I mean, I studied leadership. I taught it. I worked at the Bell South Leadership Institute when I came out of Georgia Tech. I've coached people. I've coached leadership teams. But until I went through what we went through between 2008 and 2013, to me, leadership was all about a position, a role. In many ways, it was possessions. In many ways, it might be financial status. It could be so many of those things. And so what I've done over the last few years is I've realized that it may have just a slight amount to do with those things. But what true leadership is, it's being a steward, a caretaker, an overseer to those people, places, and things that God has gifted you with. And I have never seen that definition anywhere. It may be out there, I don't know, but the definition that you're asking about is, and that's also why I think that everyone has some form of a leadership role. Because let's talk about someone who's a single mom. And in our society that we're in our, you know, our first world success society, how we define that, most people or many people would look at maybe a single mom that maybe has a very low income, maybe struggling to get by. They would not consider that person a leader in the way that our society defines it. Well, to me, I would say using that gauge of stewardship, she has been gifted, especially if she's a parent, she's been gifted with resources, people, places, things. And that steward leadership role is powerful. And she is as much of a leader as the CEO of any large corporation in our country. So that's the definition, and I also believe it also fits into what our assignment is within the kingdom of God. I think in that spiritual aspect of it, and so that's kind of how I tie that definition together. Does that make sense to you?
You know, it does. And I'm glad you clarified that, because when you sent us that, again, the information that you sent us, I was like, okay, I got to know his definition. Like I'm genuinely excited about that. Like I love hearing new definitions of things, especially if my definition has been wrong on something. And so I'm glad you clarified that for us. And that was super insightful. I heard, and again, I might be wrong on this as well, but I heard years ago, and it might be Colin Powell, it might be somebody else, but I believe it was Colin Powell. He said, leadership isn't about telling people what to do. It's about motivating people to do it.
Yeah, that's an excellent variation of it. And one thing that I want to say too, just about leadership in general, is that there's really not a lot of, I don't want to say right or wrong answers. There may be some things that kind of get crazy, and there may be people that are kind of questioning the definition that we just gave. But yeah, we could tie motivation in. We can tie in how do you lead people that you really don't have authority over? How do you influence people? How do you encourage people to be the best that they can be? All of that is leadership. And I'm sure we've got listeners that they may not be thinking that they run a company or a business, but I can almost guarantee you that we could spend some time with them, Neil, and we could show them how they are some form of a steward leader. They've got stewardship. They've got responsibility over something. And that's really where I've drawn that definition of leadership from. And you know what? A lot of it, Neil, has come from having responsibility or ownership over a lot of stuff, and then all of a sudden, quote unquote, losing all that stuff, because I've really had to dig deep and understand what that does as far as my identity and who I am as a real person. So there's been a lot of layers to that definition that you just asked about.
I just love that. I love leadership in general. I love the fact how you define that. I really do. Well articulated. To me, I've struggled as a leader, if I'm being honest, right? I have been, in a pastoral leadership role. I've been in a manager role. I tried to start my own company, a number of years back. We're running this podcast now, and so to me, leadership is one of those hard subjects for me, because I always am so critical of who the leader is above me, right? I'm critical of that boss. I'm critical of that supervisor. I could do it better than they could. And I think when we have that attitude, I don't know if you've ever had that attitude, but if you have, how did you counteract that? How did you counteract that negativity and try to turn it into a positive?
Well, since we've already ventured into some spiritual, I'll go ahead and venture into, I think what we try to do many times is we look at just the natural realm and what's going on there. But you see, the way I've developed my thought process over the last few years, Neil, is that everything to me, and I mean everything, is in relation to what is my assignment in the kingdom of God. And I use those words very intentionally. I use the word assignment in the kingdom of God, because it's not a job, it's not a role, it's my assignment. Just like right now, during this time we're spending together, I am very confident that my assignment is to do everything I can to answer questions you have truthfully, to the person listening, to attempt to speak with integrity and truth in sharing either my story or questions you're asking me. That is my assignment right now for this hour, or however that we're spending together. And I do that on a daily basis. So if all of a sudden I now am working for you, and let's just say that we're working in an ice cream store, and you're the owner, manager of the ice cream store, and I'm scooping ice cream. and I'm 56 years old and you're 40 years old, and I may think that I know more than you and I may be better at whatever, but my assignment during that time, for however long I feel that I'm supposed to be there, Neil, is to scoop that ice cream and to bring the kingdom of God, to bring love, to bring compassion, excellence into that ice cream store. And if that means that I need to submit to you, even if I think maybe we aren't on the same page, then that's what I have to do in that role for that time. Now, if you do something that's maybe lacks integrity or you mistreat, if there's another employee and all, then I think it's also my role to say something. I need to do it in the appropriate way and maybe ask questions. But everything really is related to assignments. So see, I've had assignments where I'm overseeing large companies and businesses, and I might have done okay, maybe not, I don't know. But now I've got an assignment where I run a podcast very similar to you. I coach and I work with clients, and I just do the best that I can with what I've been equipped with. And if I can't, then I just lift it up to the Lord, say, Lord, I'm going to need your help because you've asked me to steward over this today, and I could do pretty good in some areas, but I really need your help. So maybe that answered your question. It might have been more than you asked for, but it really relates to what is my assignment. And if it's my assignment in the kingdom of God and he's put me there, then I believe he's told me that he's going to equip me with the resources, the people skills, the people, the finances, everything that I need to fulfill that assignment.
Yeah, I think it comes back to that word that I love to say so often, and that's that perspective word, right? That if I have the perspective, if I'm hearing you right, if I have the perspective that, hey, this is my assignment, this is my job, this is my task, whatever it may be for this moment, for this season, for this whatever, I can keep that positive mindset like, hey, my assignment is just to scoop ice cream, using your analogy. My assignment isn't necessarily to worry if we're advertising correctly in the business, unless that's part of my assignment, right? My assignment is to be good to customers. That's part of my assignment. Like you have these tasks that are assigned to that assignment, right? Subcategories perhaps of that assignment. No, I think that's brilliant, Tim. And again, great insight there for sure. So leading into this, I'm also curious about how is your wife, and I know you necessarily can't speak from her perspective or her point of view, but has your wife's view of you changed in any way through this process? Does she love you more now than she did back then? I mean, I don't know if that's a weird question or not, but I know, I would imagine, I've been married 19 years this summer. August will be 19 years for my bride and I, Elizabeth. So babe, there's a mention. We try to keep track of mentions. So one day I'll pay out on every time I talk about her, she gets $1, but one day I'll pay out. But as of yet, haven't yet. But I would imagine there was some struggles to the marriage. There was a struggle in the relationship. Did any of that occur at all?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, when you asked the question, does she love me more? I don't know if I can answer that.
Yeah, right. I know. That's why I said it's kind of a weird way to say that, perhaps.
I would hope, I think there's an interesting word, we could throw in a word, respect, that might be applicable here. And, we've got this weird thing in our society, and there's actually some scripture that maybe even either helps it or hurts this, and that is that, a man is supposed to take care of his family. A man is supposed to provide all the financials and, make sure they've got roof over their head and everything. And of course, the way our first world is, we've kind of taken that and blown it up to the nth degree that, it's not just that we're supposed to have one big screen TV. We're supposed to have 3 or 4 in our house. We're not just supposed to have a vehicle that will get us around and provide transportation. We need to have 2, 3, 4 cars in the garage. And so it does create this odd thing that as a couple is interacting and, we're spending time with people and, we move into a country club community, and then years later we have to move out in many ways, a very shameful way. It can create some some situation where I would say this, that she could look at me and go, okay, hero, you said you were going to take care of us. What's up with this? We're about to be moving into a Honda van. And we've had these discussions, so this is not anything I'm saying out of turn, but one of the things that we made a commitment early on was that we were going to watch the words that came out of our mouths related to each other. And the reason that that's important, Neil, is because both of us, after we went through many of those things that we talked about earlier, we did share with each other and say, there were some things going through my head that I am so thankful that I did not verbalize them, because I know they would have hurt you. And so I guess in answer to your question, I'll say it this way. This is the way my wife and I look at on our journey that we've been on. We would not wish what we've been through on anyone, but we are so thankful that we went through it because of the people we are today, the relationship that we have, the things that we learned, the things that the Lord has been able to do to, I guess, refine us, to make us, we hopefully believe we're better people today, not just because we lost a bunch of money in business. That's not it. It's because we don't elevate and idolize those things like we probably did at one point. It's kind of insignificant to us. Finances, insignificant. And what's interesting, the more insignificant it becomes, the more we seem to have. That's a whole nother topic if you want to go down that road. So are we through it now? Yes. Had you asked this question in 2013, you might have gotten some interesting answers.
Well, first off, thanks for being vulnerable there. I really feel like you kind of let us in behind the curtain, so to speak, of really where you were and where you are. And, I always value that when that happens. And I hope my question didn't come off as inappropriate or, none of our business, but I know in my marriage, we've had some high notes and we've had some low notes, and, it's tough. Marriage is not easy. People think it is. It's not. It's tough. When you're talking about, a whole different person, a whole different lifestyle, a whole different, mindset, way of thinking, personalities come into play, Enneagram, if you're into that, I don't know, but, I don't know. There's just so many just variables that come with marriage. So thanks for that.
It's hard enough, Neil, for people to live with themselves and our identity and who we are and who we were created to be. And yes, I do the personality profiles and all of that for all my coaching clients and the leadership teams that I work with. But then you add someone else that you're going to be with 24/7. And my wife and I have been in business together, and some of those businesses we've done very well, and some we've obviously had challenges with. And so you throw that in the mix, and we know that one of the biggest challenges for marriages not working are financial. Now, I think financial is a reflection of other things. So, there is that, but I totally agree with you. Marriage can be very challenging. I mean, we have difficulty being ourselves, much less joining with someone else 24/7. So you're correct. And we did go through difficult things, but let me just tell you, we are better people because of all that we've been through.
Well, and that to me is a great testimony, probably to your kids and others who have watched you, who are on your inner circle, that are like, man, if Tim and Gloria can get through this, we can get through it too, right?
Yeah, we on the first season, when I started our podcast, Seek, Go, Create, I really wanted to jump into interviews. I'm a business guy. I have a lot of connections in that space, and I just wanted to interview entrepreneurs, business leaders, and we've got a strong element. I mean, you could tell from me talking. I also have a background in ministry, that faith is a big part of all that I do. I don't separate any of that out. And so I wanted to do interviews, and I was just kind of praying to the Lord, and the Lord said, yeah, I think you're okay to start a podcast now. And he kind of gave me the instruction to share. And I kind of needed that instruction because I could also sell and pitch and I could make money with a lot of different things. It's just something I'm wired to do. And the Lord told me, he said, before you do any of your interviews and all, first season, you have to share your testimony. And Neil, you can almost go back to that first episode or two where I'm telling in more detail some of the things we talked about. And you could literally hear the quiver in my voice. It's not because of the mic either. It's because my voice is shaking because I really didn't want to share a lot of that. But one of the things that's happened, Neil, is I've had people reach out to us that went through things in either '08 or, they've gone through other challenges, and they've thanked us so much for being transparent and for sharing that. And I guess that testimony has just kind of made me feel, I don't know if validate is even the right word, but made me feel as if that was what we were supposed to do, is just go ahead and share all that ugly stuff that we went through. The Lord helped us get through it so that maybe it could minister to someone. And, the times we're in right now, we're probably about to face some economic issues because of all that's gone on. We can't shut down the world for 90 days and not have economic challenges in the system that we have. My hope is that maybe our story can be a little bit of encouragement to people.
Well, I think that's the goal for any of us, right? That are podcasting or that are creating in these new spaces. Podcasting to me is still very new, and I know it's been around a really long time. And, we have a lot of acquaintances through the Christian Podcast Association group that, have been doing it forever, and it seems like forever probably for them. But for me, this is still a new platform, and so it's still exciting and still, relevant and still cool. And I don't know, there's something about turning on the mic, every, week or every, couple of days doing an interview with somebody that I'm like, man, this is still so fun. And I love that. So Tim, talk about not only Seek, Go, Create, but why should people use you maybe as coaching? So I'll let you put on your sales hat for a minute and kind of pitch to us why people should utilize you and perhaps reach out to you if they're struggling with some coaching stuff.
Yeah, well, I'll just, since you give me the opportunity to sell and pitch and gave me that permission, Seek, Go, Create is just a place for me to do like you just said. I get so excited when I get to talk to people, interview them, and share, and that's just the place that we do that. We are in the entrepreneur category, and we talk a lot about business, a lot about leadership. And then we also mix in, obviously, faith is a part of it. With ministry, I've actually interviewed quite a few people that are in leadership in the ministry world. And then also we sprinkle in a little bit of our nomad life of, how we live currently and travel. And so that's Seek, Go, Create. I think it's a great area. And of course, kind of like you, I'm very excited about what we're doing and just that ability to share like that. I actually feel as if I was created to be a coach. And I'll say it this way, Neil, since early on, when I was in high school, before I decided to go to Georgia Tech, I really wanted to be a coach. And both my parents are educators, so teaching and training was kind of bred into me, I guess. And I thought I was going to be doing it in athletics, but I started going down business. I really enjoyed business. I'm fairly proficient at it. And so really what I believe I'm wired, created to do right now, Neil, is really to reach down inside people and to pull out the potential that has always been there or that was created to be there and just help bring that to life. And we also do that not just with individuals in obviously business or organizations, but we do it in companies and also ministry. So, one example, I just started working with a leadership team of a company, and I'm actually doing coaching and working with the 6 people that are on the leadership team. And we're growing that business. They've got a goal to do 10 million in the very near future, and that's going to even happen with all that's going on with the economy. And so that's one example. I can give you other examples, but I work with small business owners, small to medium-sized companies, and I just help them reach their potential. That's really what I do with them, and it involves a lot of different things, and that's primarily what I do.
Yeah, I think that's great. And when you and I first started interacting through, our channels, through the podcast community channels, as we already mentioned, again, just fascinated by not only your story, how you recovered from that, but just the idea that, we need a coach. I don't care who you are. I don't care, what profession you're in. I believe everyone needs, if we're going to go scriptural, which, we've had a lot of that element today, which is totally fine. Everyone needs a Paul, right? And someone needs to be a Timothy. There needs to be that kind of mentoring going on. And I really value that, you're bringing that to people and your insight, of course, through the years. And I know you have a lot to draw from. So that's also really cool. So, Tim, as we kind of wrap up today, I want to ask you this last question if we can, and then I want to play a game with you if you're open to that.
I guess I am. I'm of everyone in my family, I'm like the least game player. I'm kind of a task focused, but I'll play a game.
Okay, it's super easy. It's just a really lame way we end the show. I say lame, but it's exciting, right? I never know what's going to happen. So here we go. So last question, if we can kind of maybe camp on this, and that's this: greatest lesson you ever learned from a leader yourself? And it can be a coach too, leader, coach. So if that helps.
Yeah. And that is, boy, that's a big question, Neil. And listen, you're talking to somebody here who's studied this stuff for a long period of time. I'm gonna kind of go sidebar and do this in a very different and unique way. I wrote an article. It's on my blog called 3 Lessons I Learned from My Grandfathers a while back, a long time, like 3 or 4 years ago. And this was a basic that I learned from my grandfather. I called him Granddaddy on my mother's side. And he was a guy that above all else, he was nice and kind to everyone he interacted with. And, my other grandfather was a business person and all, but my granddaddy, he was a guard at a local chemical place, and he sat in the guard shack. And we would also go visit the old folks home and the hospital in the little town of Aberdeen, Mississippi. And Neil, I'm going to put him as a leader, and I'm going to say what I learned from him is that above all else, there's a scripture to this, we should show love, but let's just go ahead and keep it just regular. Be nice to people, smile, and be nice to people, because there is nothing that we should ever do that allows us to not do that.
Wow, that's really deep.
Is it?
I'm
Is that
serious.
deep?
Like, it's really deep. Like, I mean, it sounds so simple in concept, right? I mean, it really does. Like, oh, just be nice to people. But there's a deeper layer to that.
Listen, we could
Isn't
do a
there?
deep dive on it if you want to. I mean, it spills over into everything that I think we are as created humans, because we're in a very divisive time, and we all hang out sometimes on social media, and you and I are in a mastermind together, and I believe that part of what we all are supposed to do is to do all we can to reach out to Neil and try. Now, listen, I'm going to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, and we will screw this stuff up. But I need to try to help you. I need to try to show love to you. I need to try to be kind. And if that is a foundation that we all at least give an effort for, then number one, it keeps us from being selfish, and selfish is one of the ugliest things we could all be. It keeps us from taking ourselves too seriously, which that's something that we could go down that road. And it really just makes the world a better place. And so just be nice to people. I mean, I don't know what else to say. I mean, even Jesus was firm with the Pharisees, but he didn't get ugly with them, but he did talk to them kind of interesting, but we won't get into that. But, I just think that from a basic leadership standpoint is let's just try to be nice to people. Let's be kind. Let's show love. That, man, I'd love to live in a world that was what at least the majority of us did.
Love it. I love it a lot, Tim. Okay, so here's our game. We like to call it Senseless. So I'm sure you know the 5 senses, right? I hope.
Yeah,
okay.
I think so.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Just checking. Just checking. Want to make sure. So we're going to roll a dice on your behalf because you're in Colorado, not in Oregon. So here we go. We're going to roll on your behalf, and you got a number 2, which means you get to answer this question number 2. Who is touching your life right now?
Who is touching your life right now?
That is correct.
Darn, this is a tough.
You got it right.
Oh, I know. No, this is an easy question now.
Okay.
I am a first-time grandfather. My daughter and her husband, I think we're right at 4 months ago, just had our first granddaughter. Her name is Aderie, and let me just tell you, game changer, Neil. I mean, there is very few things that I could compare to being a grandfather, and it is so cool and so awesome to just be in that role. So I think that I answered. I mean, is that okay? That's what's touching.
No, that's
who is touching
that's
my
fine.
life right now. Is my
no
granddaughter.
judgment. We don't know. We never know what we're gonna get, right? So that's the whole thing. So we never know. So I'm gonna build on that though, if we can, just follow up to that. What lesson will you teach Aderie that will help her in life?
I'm gonna give an example. The other day that was very difficult. Our daughter sent us a video of Aderie, and she's just now they do this thing now they call tummy time. I guess is where they lay the kid on their tummy, and the kid stretches and tries to move, and they try to see if they flip over. You know, there's all these milestones, and Aderie is sitting there, and we're hearing the straining going on in her voice as she's pushing up, trying to flip over. And my wife and I are watching this video. We weren't with them at the time. And this is the lesson, Neil, and it's a lesson I think for all of us and our listeners. And I looked at my wife and I said, how do we allow that stress and strain with other people that we love so that they can grow and move to the next phase of life without jumping in and flipping them over and doing it for them? And so the lesson would be, I want to do things for you, but I want you to experience life to the fullest on your own, which means having successes, having failures, having good days, having days that might not be so good. That would be the lesson that I would want to share.
Tim, I'm telling you, that's wisdom right there. That's awesome. It's good stuff. Guys, I want to thank my guests one more time, Tim Winder. Tim, thanks so much for coming on today. I appreciate it. Give the website, because I know you have some websites available. If you wouldn't mind, give those as well, so we can tell our people how to get in touch with you as well.
Sure. The best place, again, the podcast, Seek Go Create, seekgocreate.com, or you could find it on all the platforms, Apple, Spotify, all of those. They're there. And then they could also reach me and learn more about what I do. And I've written some things, and find me at timwinders.com, TIMWINDERS.com, and reach out. I'd love to hear from people.
Absolutely. We, of course, will link that in our amazing show notes. So guys, go check that out, and we'll make sure that we link Tim's podcast as well. So for all those entrepreneurs, that's a fun word to say, out there, can go check that out as well. So Tim, again, thanks so much for joining us today. We appreciate it tremendously, and blessings to you and your family and your journeys on where the road may take you next.
Thank you, Neil. I enjoyed it. Great to chat with you.
All right. Thank you again. Guys, just remember, so much great insight today with Tim, so much excitement. I love the assignment aspect. So maybe think about that for your own life. What is the assignment in your life that you need to complete? What is something that you're really being assigned that you have to work through, that you have to come over some hurdles and some challenges? Ask yourself the question, am I trying to do someone else's assignment? Because if you are, I don't know, you might be doing it wrong. Just an idea for you. So just remember, guys, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. On behalf of executive producer Garrett and myself, Neil Matthews, we of course want to invite you back next week as we try on other people's shoes. Thank you so much for joining us on Other People's Shoes. As you know, I'm your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for listening today. I want to thank my guest, Tim, one more time. Guys, I don't know about you, we all need that coach in our life. We all need that person that's going to spur us on to greater things. And I believe Tim is doing that with his Seek, Go, Create movement that he's a part of. Guys, if you'd like to know more about Tim and what he's doing, please, of course, check out our show notes. We, of course, have linked his information down there, and we would invite you to reach out to him. It's next week's guest has, in my mind, changed a lot of what we do around here. And why is that? Well, you're going to get a little sneak preview of next week's guest right now.
There's this little boy, and there's this massive tree, and little boy's kind of hugging the base of the tree, and he knows there's a tree there, but to truly understand all that's there, you get a glimpse. It's kind of like I feel about the divine, like I feel about God. I get just enough of a glimpse to know that there's something there, but there's so much more that I don't know. And so it just becomes this continual opportunity to find out more and more and get more and more clear. Not to become right, so that I can use it as some sort of opportunity to give me authority or control or dominion. It's more of it's this internal journey that allows me to, okay, maybe this is part of the reason. This is part of the experience of why we're here. So it's really just this search for why.
That's right. We're going to be sitting down with a gentleman that I believe is in the same lane that we're in. He's running the same kind of race we're in. What that race is all about, this idea of having empathy and having a conversation and really getting to the root of what people are after. But I just want to invite you back. We're sitting down with a guest that hosts a show called Come to the Table. And that, to me, brings so many questions to my mind, and maybe yours as well. So join us next Wednesday. That, of course, is when the show will come out. Each and every week, if you'd like to go check it out, it's at opspodcast.com. That's a great place to bookmark. Each and every week, we'll have a brand new shiny show for you to take a listen to. So if you'd like to be a part of that, we of course would welcome that. Speaking of welcoming things, we are on the hunt. We're on a search mode still, and we of course are looking for our next guest. And so if that's you, or maybe you know someone that is, we of course would love to get in touch with them. So they of course, or you can reach out to us at 203-548-7463. That of course is a great number to leave a voicemail or send a text to us, and we'll get in touch with you about being a guest on a future show of Other People's Shoes. Or if you'd like to send us some feedback, that of course can be done at that same number, 203-548-7463. So please stay connected with us there. Speaking of being connected, of course, we are on social media. We are under OPS Podcast Show under Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We of course would love for you to follow us, tweet us, and like us on those three platforms. So just remember, guys, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. On behalf of executive producer Garrett and myself, Neil Matthews, we of course want to invite you back next week as we try on Other People's Shoes.